Alireza Firouzja, a 16-year-old Iranian chess prodigy, sat down to play a blitz game against Magnus Carlsen, the current world champion, in December 2019 at the World Championships. Once the game was completed, Alireza composed this letter of appeal and submitted it to FIDE for 300, making it the most contentious game they had ever played. What transpired then? At the beginning of the game, Alireza begins with e4, followed by Magnus e5. Knights f3, c6, bishop b5, and a6 are now visible. Along with the bishop being kicked, Alireza falls back, and Magnus now makes an uncommon move with d6. Knight f6 is considerably more typical, as you can see. It appears that he wants to build a closed pawn structure. After c3, Alireza prepared d4 using the traditional plan. Magnus chooses to go g6, making it somewhat reminiscent of the King's Indian defense configuration. On the board, bishop g7, h3, a conventional-looking move, is now d4 as seen above. When the knight advances, the bishop just reclines and shields this pawn. Both players now bring their rooks to the e-file, while Magnus castles acting as the king. When Alireza builds his knight, he is careful not to use d5 too quickly, lest Magnus dump his knight back. Now Magnus is using queen e7, and this is a fantastic maneuver. We'll understand the reason shortly. Thus, knight f1 played coming around g3, and queen f8 now appears strange, but following knight g3, because it is Magnus' weak bishop, bishop h6 is now attempting to trade those dark squared bishops. He's attempting to swap it off because it is placed on pawns of the same color as those in the center. As the game gets intense, Alireza's use of space in this instance is instructive as he refuses to accept knight g5. Maintaining this central bound without trading pieces too quickly makes Magnus wait. The bishop now bounces back to this diagonal and looks down at the king as he dives back with his knight. As soon as the knight enters e6, h4 has already been played, anchoring it there because it is once more under siege. Magnus merely waits, not wishing to alter the pawn structure or move pieces. Bishop e3, now Alireza continues to progress. Magnus waits once more while the pawn advances and takes up more space. Magnus then responds with the bishop. Seems strange, but the pawn is no longer used to protect it. Here, queen c1 is defending it, while Magnus launches a counterattack. Now, as Alireza is trying to pick up this bishop pair, he makes a blunder. Instead of taking on e6 and hitting the queen, he should have simply dropped back with this bishop, kept it on the diagonal, and protected his knight. The f-file is connected by queen d2. The rooks are getting ready to challenge, and Magnus is merely playing calmly. He was supposed to move with g5 right away to begin pressing this knight and this pawn, but instead, he took the pawn back first, losing the tempo, and then he just moved the king. Alireza has additional time to work on this file. Magnus arrives with the rook and reclaims rook f8. But Alireza now sends queen c3. He just has a short window to begin developing some counter threats. This piece is currently under attack. Magnus running out of time. And the clock is ticking. Magnus has around 20 seconds remaining on his timer. While he plays c6, he's currently really uncomfortable. With the knight, Alireza has time to retreat without much concern. The king is secure enough for Magnus to take if he so chooses. Magnus instead shows us his e5, but this is a hazardous move. The pawn was recovered, and now that we have this queen to b4 check, Magnus should block with the pawn. If white were to check, the crucial difference would be that when captures here occur, there's no time for b5 to kick the queen, since your own queen is going to tumble. Alireza strikes b7, striking his bishop that scurries to b5, intending to capture this knight on f1, but at this point we have examined the actions of the king. Another pawn has just fallen. Magnus only possessed a king and a bishop, which is typically not enough material to checkmate the white king. In this case, a draw would typically be called because Magnus had won the game on time, but lacked the necessary checkmate pieces. Magnus, however, objected to that decision, and as we can see from this series of actions, it turns out he was right to do so. Skipping toward the end of the game, Alireza comes with his king and queening the pawn. So again, the king comes round in front, but now he steps back and picks up another pawn. That's 3 pawns ahead. King e7, king h5, bishop d2, and now the pawn kicks on bishop 4, and here Alireza makes a mistake. The move he should play for a win. The winning plan was pushing on with g6, but instead, we see the king step backwards and hit this bishop. Magnus uses a blockade on the dark squares, but after king g4, Magnus goes to bishop d2. Alireza has lost on time, but how does one of the world's best blitz players lose on time? What the controversy was about. The game was decided in Magnus' favor, but Alireza was not pleased. It turned out that black may checkmate the white king with only the bishop and the king if white makes significant contributions to the cause, such as under-promoting a knight. His initial complaint was that this would result in checkmate for black, but when it was demonstrated to him how it might and the rule in the rulebook, he changed his mind. He acknowledged it, but while Ali Reza was running behind schedule, he claimed that Magnus Carlsen was mumbling under his breath, distracting him. He was so certain about the issue that he later filed this letter of appeal disputing the ruling. Conclusion. So it begs the question, did Magnus mumble to annoy the rooster? This is the crucial point Ali Reza is referring to, and while it is obvious that Magnus is dissatisfied and murmurs, Ali Reza ought to have stopped the clock at that time and raised an objection, considering that he did so after the game was over. FIDE then rejected his appeal as a result of this. This rejection made it possible for Magnus to tie for first place with Hikaru, and he finally won the tight tiebreak to secure the top spot. Thanks for viewing, and I'll talk to you soon. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.